Hey y'all, so today we're going to look at WebGPU, how to build to it. Last week I went through build profiles and had the question of how do you get all this new web stuff that Unity's working on, so this is the video to cover that. I'm going to use the Viking Village URP scene to build a project and have this as the main featured level. Then I'm going to enable WebGPU. Then I'm going to build out to my build target and show you all what it looks like. So stay tuned and I'll see you in the project. What I'm doing for this one is just creating a universal 3D core SRP project in Unity 6, calling it Viking Village, and hitting create. Okay, so the project is open, and I'm now going to hit open in Unity on Viking Village URP. That will pop up Pacman or the package manager with this URP asset, and I'm going to hit import 1.1.1 into project. All right, so the Viking Village URP asset is now finished bringing into this project. I'm going to exit out of Pacman, come over to Viking Village, find scenes, and open up the scene here. Looking pretty good. This is an asset that's been out for a while, so I'm glad to say it still holds up pretty well, looks decent. And now we'll get into the meat and potatoes of it. So in my previous video, we went over what are build profiles and how to work with them. In this one, we're going to just go straight into the platform and some of the player settings here. So I want to move this over to a web build target. It is super important that you do this in the order that I am doing it. So you need to move to a web build target before you edit and add in WebGPU as a target platform, or a graphics API target rather. Otherwise, some things get a little wonky. That's because right now it's experimental, but just follow along in this order and you'll be good to go. So I'm going to go ahead and hit switch platform with web selected. And as soon as that's done, we'll get into the next step. All right, so now we are on a web build target. And before we hit build and run, as of right now, if we click on player settings, pull this up, you can see that we are inside of web, inside of the player. And if you scroll down underneath other settings, you're going to have a setting for auto graphics API. I'm going to turn that off and see that our graphics API is set to WebGL 2. If I hit the plus sign, we're also going to see WebGL 2, but grayed out because it's already been allocated. So this is what we need to do. We need to pull up our Unity Hub, grab this project and find it in File Explorer, open it up, go into Project Settings, and then find Project Settings.asset. Open that in the text editor of your choice, and then hit Control F and search for WebGPU. Down here, there's a setting called WebGL Enable WebGPU. It is set to 0. This is more or less a binary setting, so 0 is off, 1 is on. Then you can either hit Control S or do a file save, exit out, and then minimize your hub. And now you're going to see when we come back into other settings, I'm going to untick that again. We see WebGL 2 is selected, and we now have a WebGPU experimental option. An important thing that you want to do here is that the list of the APIs is the list of priorities that will try to be used. So you want to put WebGPU experimental on top. So that will be the priority. And then if the client or the hardware cannot run WebGPU, it will fall back to WebGL. So now we're all set. That's really it. So we have WebGPU, WebGL 2. I'm going to exit out of this. The last thing that we want to do before we hit build and run, actually, is that we want to check that the scene list is what we hoped that it would be, which right now it looks like whatever it's looking at has been deleted, which is no good. So I'm going to come up here, remove selection, and hit add open scenes. Now if I come back down to web, it should have that checked, and now we're good to go. With it being unchecked, it was effectively trying to create a build of nothing because there was no scene in this list. So again, your scene list is created up here. If you want, you can always add them inside of the platform or within the build profile. All we have left to do is build and run. I'm going to select the GPU web folder and hit select folder and let this get off to the races. All right, so I just finished building and here it is running. I'm recording at 4K and this is on a 4K screen and it's running right now at 60 FPS. I'm imagining if I expand it to 4K, it's going to drop pretty significantly as this is all running over web. 10 to 20 FPS, something in that range, it looks like. Not ideal. However, at a lower resolution, we're really doing well here. I'm also, just for the sake of showing it, going to pull up my other monitor that is a 1080 so that we can take a quick look at that. So let me add a quick display capture. Grab this right here. So this is my 1080 in the top left. I'm going to go ahead and full screen that. And that is playing at 1080. I'll res it up real quick so that we can see it here. 60 FPS playing over web. Full screen, 1080p. That's pretty damn cool. One last thing that I'll show maybe. Let me turn off this display capture and I'll move this back over. Will be, if you're not sure how this is running, you can see here easily that it does say WebGPU in the window. But if you're looking at something that doesn't have like an FPS counter and a bunch of information about what you're running on, you can always hit F12. And usually it'll pop up the elements first. If you go over into console and scroll down, there is usually right under here, you have Unity WebGPU with the version of WebGPU that it's using. The render is labeled as a WebGPU device. So if you don't have a quick display to show you that, that's how you know if it is in fact running in WebGPU instead of WebGL. I'm going to hit F12 to get back out of this. And that's it, everybody. So it really doesn't take a lot. It's one text change within an asset file in order to enable the ability to point to WebGPU as a graphics API endpoint. And we have it here running at 60 FPS. So I hope you can go in, check out a bunch of your own scenes. There are some limitations that we can get into in a future video if people want more detailed breakdowns. One of them being, I think that there's a 400 megabyte limit on the size of the folder that's running all of this. So I've tried to do this in the past with other much larger projects and it did not take. So this isn't to make you think that you can just take any URP project and change the endpoint to WebGPU and it'll just run. But within the limitations that it has, I think this is exceptional. So I could now host this somewhere if I chose to. Send this URL out to anybody, and that way I'm not forcing them to download an app or anything like that. This, along with all of the improvements to mobile web that Unity has coming with Unity 6 and beyond, as they had their talk on at Unite, I'm super excited to see what web has in store for us. So to recap, we looked at what WebGPU is, briefly, what the advantages are, how to get it turned on in your project, how to point to it within your build profiles or your build settings within the player settings. Again, it's player settings, other settings, graphics API is where you want to add that in. And please make sure that you follow it in the same order that I did. Otherwise, you're going to have some issues, at least at this stage in the experimental WebGPU target. I hope that you learned something. Thanks for watching. Have a great day. Like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see y'all in the next one.